What's going on YouTube? R2R Moto here, and today by the title you can see that we're going to be talking about the 5 things that I hate about my DRZ400SM. Well, the title really should be more so called 2 or 3 things that I kind of dislike about my DRZ400SM, but I needed more than just 2 things because this video would only be like a minute long, so therefore I found 3 more things to talk about. So right off the bat, the first thing that I would say I dislike about my DRZ400 is I dislike the fact that the bike is only 5-speed instead of 6. Now, if you talk to anybody about the DRZ400, it's probably going to be the first thing that most people complain about, that the DRZ is only 5 gears. Now, when it comes to street riding, 5 gears doesn't really matter on this bike. It's perfectly fine with only 5 gears. Where the 5-gear transmission actually matters, and speaking of that, I tried to shift up to 6 right there. Where 5-speed actually matters is when it comes to the highway. You can definitely find yourself at the higher speed struggling for that other gear. Now, obviously the DRZ only being a 400cc motor, it's not necessarily meant to be going on the highway, but when you're on the highway, you can kind of feel that that's definitely not where it's meant to be, and that lack of that 6 gear is definitely what causes it. The second thing on this bike that I would say that I dislike is the fact that from factory, if you're going to ride this bike off-road, you already have to invest in case savers. Now, case savers aren't that much money. They're only like $40, but still $40 for just a piece of metal that goes over your clutch case and your crankcase. It's just a lot of money for that. That's something that they could probably just do from factory. Now, I understand that the DRZ is grandfathered in time, and that will also come back to one of the things later that I dislike about this bike. But with it being grandfathered in time, they're obviously not going to change it. But it would be something that I wish they would change, because it is definitely something about this bike that I dislike. So when it comes to this bike being grandfathered in time, another thing that I dislike about the DRZ400 is I dislike the stock gauge. Now, in my opinion, the stock gauge is missing 3 things. 1, a fuel gauge, 2, a temperature gauge, and 3, an RPM gauge. Now, the RPM gauge, you can kind of get around, you learn the feel for the bike, and you're good. Fuel gauge, I really don't want to just sit there and have to calculate all the time that I need to put in to actually not have to run out of gas. Now, obviously, you have the trip meter, so by looking at the trip meter, you can kind of see when you're going to run low on gas, but still, even then, it's just like, I don't want to have to reset that every single time. I'm lazy. So having a fuel gauge will be cool. And then the final thing is a temperature gauge. Now, in the winter, temperature gauge doesn't really matter all that much. I mean, I would like to see the temperature of my bike when I'm starting it up in the morning, so that way I know exactly when it's at an acceptable range for me that I think the bike is warmed up and then I'm ready to go. But in the summer months is where I feel like this is going to be a bigger issue, because, I mean, if you don't stay on top of your coolant, first of all, you're going to run into bad problems because your bike's going to overheat pretty quickly. So being able to tell what temperature your bike is at would definitely be something that could help you in the long run with this bike. So the 4th thing that I dislike about my DRZ400 is I dislike the throttle grip. So this grip right here, I don't know if you know anything about the DRZ, if you own one or not, but the DRZ's throttle grip is basically glued on to the throttle tube itself. So it makes it a pain. If you just Google DRZ throttle grip and you look at some of the some of the forum posts on it, you'll find out that people spend literally hours trying to take this thing apart, which ultimately leads to you just having to buy a new throttle tube. And that definitely, when you're looking at this bike, is not something that you really recognize. But if you have a normal bike and you go to change the grips, you know that it's really simple to just change the grips. All you have to do, just take a razor blade, cut them off, bing bang boom, just slap the new grips on and you're good to go. Not with the DRZ400. The DRZ400, if you're trying to cut that grip off, you're going to be there a while, which is the same thing with air compressoring it off too, because it just is glued on there, so it takes a very long time to get off and a lot of scraping off the bar. So the 5th thing that I dislike about my DRZ400 is going to be the stock seat. Now, I refer to this seat as basically the 3-hour seat, meaning that if you're riding this bike longer than 3 hours, you're gonna notice that the seat is there, and it is going to make you hate it for the entire rest of the ride that you're on it. The stock seat is a very, very hard seat, which leads a lot of people to go with a comfort seat in the end, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing eventually anyway. I'm probably going to end up upgrading to a comfort seat eventually anyway, because overall, riding this bike for longer periods of time, that seat is just not going to cut it. It's a very, very hard seat. So that was a pretty quick video about the things that I dislike about my DRZ400. In the future, I'm going to make things I love about my DRZ. And if you want to check that video out, hit that subscribe button to be notified for more content. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.